I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Today we're reading from the book of Numbers, chapter 2, and let's focus on verses 1 and 2. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron. The Israelites are to camp under their respective banners beside the flags of their ancestral houses. They are to camp around the tent of meeting at a distance from it. Numbers 2, verses 1 and 2. Now, as we learned in Leviticus, God is very concerned with order. And the Lord wants things separate, set apart, and holy. Also, He's interested in form as much as He is in function. And the way that Israel worshiped was as important as the fact that they were worshiping at all. So this idea of form is somewhat lost on our generation because ours is a generation which rejects formality, right? Used to be you wore suits to church. Now it's just wear whatever you want. Perhaps rightly so in some cases. I think sometimes the formality became more important than the word. And yet now maybe the pendulum has swung too far the other way. Our parents and our grandparents lived in a culture where women wore white gloves and hats, for instance, and men almost always wore suits and ties, and they wore hats too. And we live in a generation where people wear t-shirts and jeans and sandals to church. For many folks from the older generation, dressing up for church became more important than why they were attending church in the first place. And the formality of religion trumped a personal relationship with God in many instances. It was dry and stiff, and especially compared to the "if it feels good, do it" mantra of the hippie movement. Eventually, their children rebelled. Not just rebelled, against the Lord and go out and into the world, but even within the church, their children rebelled against the fact that they'd put formality over relationship. But today, I sometimes wonder if the pendulum hasn't swung too far toward the casual. And in its efforts to create a comfortable, laid-back environment, has today's church lost too much of its reverence of the Lord? And is there a level of formality that is essential? Where is that balance between reverence and relevance? Know this, the balance is only to be found in the Bible. Now, as for Israel, God wanted to maintain the individuality of each tribal family, while at the same time maintaining the unity of the nation. And how was that accomplished? And what could we do to foster that balance of individuality and corporate unity in our congregations today? In a culture of church where so many people are just leaving the church. Well, paramount at the center of Israel's national life was the Ark of God's covenant. And inside the ark were the tablets containing the 10 commandments. And above the ark, God Himself met with Moses. Promise, precepts, and presence. These three constituted His relationship with His people. Believers in the Messiah, Jesus, may congregate as varied denominations, expressing their worship and their gratitude in different ways. And yet unity exists among all true believers as long as they share the same central focus, salvation through faith in Jesus alone and the authority of His Word to govern our hearts and our intents and actions. Unity exists when we share the promise of His covenant, the presence of His Holy Spirit, and the guidance of His precepts, the Bible. I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Check us out at groundworksministries.com.